They say the night remembers what men forget, and on the 21st of September, in the year of our Lord 1327, the walls of Berkeley Castle learned to keep a secret. Cold stone, colder hearts, and above it all, the stillness of England holding its breath. No trumpet marked the death of her king. No priest sang mercy into his ear. There was only the whisper of boots on wet flagstones and the flicker of torches that dared not burn too bright, lest they reveal what was about to be unmade. History records his passing as gentle. Natural causes, they wrote, but history lies most sweetly when the truth smells of blood. It lies not from malice, but out of habit, for even parchment trembles when it feels the breath of power upon it. And so the scribes wrote peace, while the stones beneath their ink still echoed the last movements of a man too royal to die quietly. Edward Plantagenet, the second of that name, son of Edward Longshanks, the hammer of the Scots, the conqueror of Wales, a king whose shadow stretched across battlefields like the wings of a god. And yet from that same bloodline came a man who feared not war, but loneliness. A man born to rule, yet ruled by affection, a king whose crown sat uneasily beside love. They mocked him for that love, for the warmth he gave to men his court could not understand. For Piers Gaveston, the glittering favorite, for Hugh Despenser, the serpent in silk. They called him weak, unfit, unkingly, and perhaps he was. But weakness, too, is a kind of tragedy. The tragedy of feeling too much in an age that demanded men feel nothing. And so they took from him the throne, and then his freedom, and now, tonight, his life. Listen closely. Do you hear it? The sound that trembles beneath the silence? It is not a scream. Screams fade. It is the groan of iron, the breath of flame, the rustle of fear shared among men sworn to obedience. No one speaks of what they are about to do. They do not look into his eyes. They have been told not to. In the corner of his cell, Edward sits, barefoot, unshaven, wrapped in a rough robe meant to strip him of majesty. But there is something unbroken in the set of his jaw, a flicker of defiance that no chain can hold. Outside, the guards murmur like guilty ghosts. Inside, the firelight licks the walls, and the king who has lost everything stares at it as though it might forgive him. Some said he was murdered in silence, that red-hot iron was used to hide the wound, a death too obscene for the living to speak of. Others said the flame burned, but not in his body. It burned in the hearts of those who stood there, watching history commit its quietest sin. Perhaps there was no weapon at all, only fear, isolation, and the slow undoing of a soul no longer wanted by the world it once ruled. Perhaps he died not of pain, but of memory, the memory of sunlight on banners, of laughter, of love. For kings, too, can die of remembrance. The door creaks open. A monk steps through, his hood drawn low, a lantern trembling in his hand. The smell of smoke and damp earth fills the cell. He kneels, whispers, "It is time, Your Grace." No reply, only a small, tired smile. Not of peace, but of surrender to something that has already happened. The king looks up, and in his eyes, a strange calm, as though he sees beyond the room, beyond his captors, to a place where even kings are free from being remembered. Then darkness swallows the flame, and with it, the name Edward becomes a ghost. But ghosts are difficult things. They live not in the grave, but in rumor. And rumor, once born, is harder to kill than any king. So when you walk the halls of Berkeley, listen carefully. You might hear the whisper of a crown laid down, or the soft scrape of a lantern on stone. You might feel the air shift, as though the night itself recalls a promise it swore never to tell. Because Edward II did not die once. He died 1,000 times. In every retelling, in every denial, in every historian's careful silence. And perhaps, in one place, one corner of the world where history's ink cannot reach, he still waits, listening as the world argues over the manner of his death and forgets the man who lived beneath the crown. The year is 1336. 9 winters have passed since the King of England was said to have died, and yet death has never been a reliable historian. In a quiet chamber in Avignon, beneath the scent of wax and ink, a man bends over parchment. His name is Manuel Fieschi, a clerk in the service of the Holy Father. But tonight, his loyalty bends towards something older, something that hums beneath the surface of faith: the truth. The candle trembles beside him. Its flame seems to listen as the quill begins to move. Each stroke of ink feels like a confession whispered to the dark. "To my Lord I write this in secret," he begins, "for I have seen what was never meant to be seen." The late king lives. He escaped from Berkeley. The words are heavy, like stones being placed upon a grave not yet finished. Outside, the bells of Avignon toll softly, as though to drown out the sound of history being rewritten. The parchment curls slightly at the edges, warmed by the breath of the candle. He crossed the sea, Fieschi continues, walked among monks, and now lives as a hermit in Savoy. There it is, a sentence sharp enough to wound 9 years of royal certainty. For if the king lives, then England has crowned a son, while the father still draws breath. And if the dead walk, then truth itself has no resting place. In the silence between the scratching of ink, we see him, the figure from Fieschi's letter. A man cloaked in rough wool, wandering through the mists of the French countryside, barefoot, unadorned, yet carrying the invisible weight of a crown. He does not speak. He does not beg. But when he passes through a village, the people bow, not out of fear, but instinct, as though their souls remember something their minds have long forgotten. There is a stillness in his eyes, that peculiar kind of stillness found in those who have lost everything and learned to live without it. Eyes that once commanded armies now watch the snow fall upon chapel roofs. Hands that once signed decrees now gather kindling for the evening fire. He lives, they say, among monks, praying not for England, but for silence. Back in Avignon, Fieschi seals the letter. He hesitates before pressing the wax, his ring trembling over the red pool. For he knows, once sealed, the words will travel farther than he ever could. They will move like ghosts through courts and kingdoms, carried by rumor, doubt, and fear. He closes his eyes and whispers a prayer. Not for forgiveness, but for the courage to speak a truth that no one will want to believe. For what greater heresy is there than to accuse history of deceit? He sends the letter, and with that act, the world shifts, subtly, silently, as though one more veil has been torn from the face of time. The story does not end with the sealing of wax. In taverns and courts, whispers begin to spread. The king lives. The grave at Gloucester is not his. There is a man in the mountains of Savoy who walks like him, prays like him, dreams like him. Truth and myth begin to dance, as they always do. The difference between them grows thinner than the parchment that first bore the words. For those who read Fieschi's letter, questions bloom like sickness. If Edward lives, who lies buried beneath the stones of Gloucester Abbey? Whose bones were washed, anointed, mourned, and buried with the tears of England's nobles? And if the grave is false, then how deep does the lie go? Did Isabella know? Did Mortimer? Did the boy king, Edward III, ascend to power over a living father's silence? Each question scratches at the coffin of certainty. Each rumor peels away another layer of truth's disguise. And somewhere, perhaps in a snowbound chapel of Savoy, the man himself stirs. He wakes before dawn, kindles a fire, and stares into the flames. The light flickers across his face, a face carved by sorrow, half remembered by history. He does not need to read the letter. He has lived its words. History is a stage where no man ever leaves completely. Some remain behind the curtains, waiting for the next storyteller brave enough to call their name. And so in the quiet of Avignon, the candle burns low, the ink dries, and the parchment waits, not to be believed, but to be feared. For truth has many tombs, and the one at Gloucester may not be the right one. If he lived, then who lies buried beneath the crown? If he died, then whose shadow still walks among the living? Night in London carries a peculiar weight, a kind of silence that does not rest, but listens. And within the tower, that silence grows thick as velvet, pressing against stone and skin alike. Queen Isabella stands at her window, watching the fog rise from the Thames like smoke from an unholy fire. She is draped in silver, pale as the moon that crowns her. Yet there is no peace in her poise, no softness in her stillness. For even queens cannot outshine memory. The tower holds many ghosts, but only one that haunts her. He does not rattle chains, nor whisper her name. He merely looks, from somewhere beyond the reach of the living, with eyes that burn like the torches of Berkeley. Those eyes belong to the man she once called husband, a man she dethroned, imprisoned, erased, but a husband nonetheless. And love once sworn before God does not die. It merely rots into something colder. Behind her, footsteps approach, measured, certain, and laced with power. Roger Mortimer, the man who traded rebellion for rule and desire for dominion. He stands behind her like a shadow that forgot to be loyal. His hands have known her skin, his voice her trust. Yet tonight, even he feels the chill of something unseen between them. She speaks, her voice fragile, like glass straining beneath weight. I see him still, in my dreams, she whispers. He says nothing, only stares. His eyes burn like the torches of Berkeley. Mortimer's jaw tightens. He has heard her speak of the dead before, but tonight the name she does not say feels closer than the one she does. Then forget the dead, he answers, with that dangerous calm only power can teach. England cannot live haunted by a ghost. A line rehearsed perhaps, a defense against guilt, not grief. But Isabella turns toward him, and the moonlight cuts her face in two, half shadow, half sorrow. And what if the ghost still breathes, she asks. The words land like a blade. Not accusation, not madness, but a confession wrapped in doubt. For she, too, has read whispers of a letter from Avignon. She has heard rumors of a hermit in Savoy whose voice once commanded armies. She does not know if they are true, and that uncertainty is the cruelest form of punishment. Mortimer looks away, but his silence is louder than denial. He knows of the letter. He knows that some secrets once buried cannot be kept from clawing through the earth. Outside, the fog thickens, rolling low across the river like a slow tide of amnesia. A bell tolls midnight, 1, then 2, then 3, each strike marking another truth that cannot be unwound. In the chamber, the queen stands unmoving, her gaze still fixed upon the night. Behind her, Mortimer shifts, uneasy in his triumph. They have everything they conspired for, the crown, the throne, the silence, and yet it feels like standing upon a grave. Perhaps that is what all power becomes in the end, a kingdom built atop the bones of those who trusted you most. The candle by the window trembles, its flame bowing to an unseen draft. Isabella closes her eyes, and for a brief moment, the world seems to exhale, as if even the air pities her. The river below moves like molten glass beneath the moon. Its current carries secrets, letters, and sins. And somewhere, far from London, perhaps one man still breathes, listening to the same midnight bell, forgiving none and forgetting nothing. For the dead do not always rest. Sometimes they simply wait, in the quiet between guilt and grace, in the silence that follows a queen's whisper. Morning breaks over Westminster like a blade. Not warm, not golden, but sharp, white, and merciless. Light floods the great hall, chasing away the remnants of night, yet it brings no comfort, for even sunlight in England can feel like judgment. The boy king sits upon the throne, Edward, the third of his name, barely more than 16, yet already older than the world expects him to be. His crown gleams, heavy not with gold, but with inheritance, a legacy carved in blood and betrayal. Before him kneels his council, men of wisdom, ambition, and fear, and in his hand, trembling only slightly, lies a sealed letter, the parchment that has crossed seas and sins to find him. The wax is foreign, the seal, papal. The words inside, a whisper from Avignon, written by one who saw too much. He breaks the seal. The hall watches, breathless. Each crack of wax sounds like the breaking of chains. He reads silently at first, eyes scanning the lines that rewrite his world. Then quietly, almost too quietly, he speaks. Your father lives, among monks, in exile. The hall does not stir. The words fall like stones into water, vanishing beneath the surface. but the ripples will reach every corner of the kingdom. The king's hands tighten around the letter. His knuckles whiten, his jaw stills. The weight of 1,000 ghosts settles upon his shoulders. All his life he has been told of a dead father, a mad king, unfit to rule, a father murdered for the peace of England, a father whose death birthed his reign. But now this letter breathes, and with it his crown trembles. He looks up. His voice, when it comes, is calm, too calm. Then who murdered the man they buried for him? The question cracks through the silence like thunder and stone. No one answers. They do not need to. The camera turns, slow, deliberate, to where Queen Isabella stands, her hands folded in measured grace, her eyes fixed on nothing. Beside her, Roger Mortimer stiffens, his face a portrait of composure drawn too tightly to last. Between them passes a single glance, fleeting, but heavy enough to drag both toward ruin. The boy on the throne sees it. He says nothing, but the silence between his breath and theirs becomes a verdict. Because crowns are never born from purity. They are hammered in the dark, forged in lies, tempered in the smoke of those who died to protect them. And now, as the son of Edward II stares at the parchment that unravels his history, the hall feels smaller, the air colder, the truth heavier. He rises slowly. The crown glints in the cruel daylight. No longer a symbol of glory, but of inheritance cursed by deceit. Around him the nobles bow deeper, mistaking stillness for strength. But beneath his calm, there is motion, a tide forming behind the mask of youth. For the first time, the kingdom begins to see the shadow that will become Edward the Just, Edward the Avenger, the king who will not be haunted, but will make others haunt themselves. And as that realization spreads, the great hall of Westminster, the seat of England's pride, begins to feel like a tomb. Because every crown casts a shadow, and shadows once awoken do not sleep again. The bell outside tolls for the midday prayer. Its sound rolls through the open arches, echoing over marble, echoing over guilt. In that echo, one truth survives all others. Power is never inherited cleanly. It is stolen, rewritten, and baptized in silence. And on this day, the silence finally learns to speak. For every crown there is a shadow, and sometimes the shadow knows more than the light will ever dare. Dawn breaks slowly over the Tower of London, not with color, but with silence. The kind of silence that comes after too many lies have been told. And finally, the world demands an answer. The air is still, heavy with mist and memory. The stones beneath the gallows glisten with dew, but it could just as easily be blood. For in England, both have always fed the earth the same way. There at the center of the courtyard, Roger Mortimer kneels. The man who once ruled from behind the throne, who whispered commands that kings obeyed, now kneels before a rope, his final audience. His face is pale, his pride unbroken. Even in disgrace, there is defiance in his silence, as though he still believes history will remember him differently. And watching him, from the high steps, beneath the first gray breath of morning, stands Edward III, no longer a boy, no longer a pawn, but the son of a murdered father and a mother too clever for mercy. He wears no crown this morning. He does not need one. The cold in his eyes is crown enough. Mortimer lifts his head. His voice, when it comes, is low but unshaken. The sound of a man speaking not to the living, but to time itself. I killed a king once, he says, but the crime that damned me was loving his queen. The words hang in the air like frost, sharp, transparent, impossible to erase. For love has always been the first betrayal, and power merely its consequence. The hangman steps forward. The rope creaks. Old wood groans. No prayers are spoken. There are none left to fit this kind of sin. The noose tightens. The crowd does not cheer. Even vengeance feels small in this kind of cold. Edward does not look away. He watches, not as a king, but as a witness. This is not triumph. It is inheritance. A son claiming what the world refused to give his father, closure. And yet behind that steel gaze lies something else, something quieter, heavier. The understanding that justice and revenge are merely two faces of the same dying God. Mortimer's lips move once more. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps a curse, but no sound escapes. The trap door falls. For a heartbeat, the body twists against the dawn, and then stillness claims him. The rope sways gently, as if the wind itself exhales relief. They say justice had been done, but justice, like death, is only certain to those who live to tell it, and those who live rewrite it. The boy who was a king watches in silence. The crowd bows. The morning light begins to bleed through the clouds, but it feels pale, reluctant, as though even the sun hesitates to bless what it sees. The camera drifts upward, past the gallows, past the stone battlements glistening with dew, until it finds her. Queen Isabella, standing behind the narrow window of her chamber. Her face is unreadable, carved from porcelain and regret. Only her eyes move, tracing the rope, the body, the end of everything she once commanded. And then a single tear escapes. Not of grief, not even of love, but of recognition that every choice made in passion must one day be paid in solitude. Below, the crowd begins to disperse. The echo of boots fades into the fog, but the air remains, haunted, unresolved, as though the ghost of Edward II has finally found breath again. The son has avenged the father. The lover has fallen. The queen has wept. And England, ever unrepentant, moves on, as it always does, forgetting that even in victory, the shadow of the gallows stretches long, and the crown once stained never truly shines again. High in the mountains of Savoy, where the air is too thin for ambition and too cold for sin, there stands a monastery built from stone older than forgiveness. Here, time moves not by clocks or crowns, but by the rhythm of snow, soft, patient, eternal. In its courtyard, beneath the ghostly hush of falling flakes, an old man tends a small fire. The wood crackles like distant memory. His hands, though worn, move with the discipline of someone who has once commanded much and lost more. He stirs the embers with a quiet care that borders on reverence. There is no crown on his head, no guards, no banners, no name spoken in fear or fealty. Only a cloak of coarse wool, a whisper of breath, and the faint glimmer of a signet ring catching the firelight. A relic of a world that has forgotten him. The mountains listen. They have heard every confession this man has never dared to make aloud. He is known here only as Father Edwardus, a recluse who prays more than he speaks. But when he looks into the flames, the reflection that stares back at him is not that of a monk. It is that of a king remembering his crown and the price he paid to remove it. The snow thickens. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bell tolls for morning mass. The sound drifts like a benediction through the wind. A sound so pure it almost cleanses the memory of betrayal. Almost. A young monk approaches, his steps muffled by frost. He kneels beside the old man, watching the fire with curiosity and a kind of innocent awe. He has lived his whole life in prayer, yet something about this hermit humbles even faith itself. "Father," he says softly, "you never told me your name." The old man smiles, faint, almost lost to the wind. His eyes are distant, but not dim. They hold the quiet gleam of a man who has walked through fire and emerged only half burned. "Names," he answers, "are for kings." He pauses, letting the words fall like snow, light but heavy in their meaning. "I was a man once," he adds, "and that was enough." The young monk bows his head, not understanding, but sensing that he has just heard a confession meant not for men, but for time. The old man turns back to the fire. The flames dance, alive with the color of memory, the red of battlefields, the gold of coronations, the silver of moonlight glancing off a cell wall in Berkeley. And as he watches, the wind rises. It howls through the stone arches, twisting through corridors and cloisters, until it shapes itself into a sound. Half breath, half whisper, a voice calling through the snow. "Edward." The old man closes his eyes. He does not answer. There are no words left to give the dead, and no forgiveness left to claim from the living. The fire flickers once more, then settles into embers, a crown of light dissolving into ash. The mountains sigh. The snow falls heavier, covering footprints, graves, and guilt alike. Perhaps he died in Berkeley, as they say. Perhaps he lived and fled beyond the reach of history. Perhaps he was both, a man divided between what the world demands and what the soul endures. Either way, the silence that followed was louder than any death, for history forgets the sound of breathing, but it never forgets the echo of regret. And so ends the reign of Edward of Caernarfon, a king undone not by war or treason, but by love, by pride, by the unbearable weight of being remembered wrongly. The snow keeps falling, bearing the world he once ruled, softly, patiently, until even the truth sleeps.